Good evening, everybody. I'm Dina Jones-Cox, and I'm really glad you could join us tonight because you are going to learn about something that all successful deal makers know about. They don't all call it the same thing that we're going to call it tonight, but they all practice it, and when you learn it, it makes a real shift in how you approach the deal-making part of your real estate business. It's a topic that when I learned it, which I have to admit was 6 or 7 years into my actual real estate career, really changed the kinds of deals I was able to do, the number of deals I was able to do, and how profitable those deals were. Now, in a normal webinar, I would be the one doing all the talking, but tonight I am the one who gets to hit the record button and then sit silently for an hour while someone else does all the work, because my partner, Mr. Drew, is going to be giving this presentation tonight. He is the one who has really done quite a bit of this stuff in our business, and who's also sort of been the one to organize the teaching of it, if you will. So Mr. Drew is, although most of you probably know him as the voice that sometimes asks me questions on the webinar, he's actually a real estate investor with over 20 years experience and who has been involved in over 800 transactions as a principal. So with that, I'm going to put myself on hold and enjoy a glass of wine. And if you all have any questions, you know how to ask them. Use the question and answer box there on the corner of the GoToWebinar panel. And when Mr. Drew finishes up with his presentation here, I will fire them at him, and he will get them all answered for you.
All right.
That'd be you now, Drew.
That's the handoff to me? Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. I want to jump right in, but before we start, what I'd like you to do is actually take a moment to get a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper, because something that might be a little unusual is when I suggest that you write something down that's not just, you know, some kind of weird salesmanship or something. I'm not just trying to emphasize the point. I'd actually like you to write it down, and you will like yourself for writing it down later. So take a moment to do that, but we're going to steam ahead. I need a moment or two of honesty from you guys. I need you not necessarily to answer me honestly, but even more important, I need you to be honest with yourselves. I need you to answer yourself honestly. Do you know that you should be marketing for leads in today's market? Do you already realize that? You know, the MLS is fairly dry in every market right now, and I know it's a big cycle, but right now if you're going to be turning the kind of numbers to make a career, to make a living at real estate investing, you pretty much have to be out there beating the bushes. So if you do know that, do you market? And if you market or know you should market, are you already doing it consistently? Now, stay honest with me. When you do marketing, do you ever avoid answering seller calls? Even when you know that you could answer, maybe you find yourself making excuses to yourself about, yeah, well, I'm driving. I can't get the call right now. And there was this invention several years ago called the headset that will even legally permit you to answer a call while you're driving without putting yourself and other motorists at risk. There are even lots of fancy things that you can put on your phone that will enable you to record the conversation, so you don't even need a hand-free to take notes. So I'm just pointing out kind of the lameness of that. Do you ever put off returning seller calls? And I don't mean for weeks. You know, that's not what I'm talking about. I mean, do you ever put it off for a day? And then the next day, maybe, you know, you're busy and you have to put it off for another day. And then the next day you're jammed up and you don't have any quiet mental space, so you put it off for another day. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? tell the truth. And then before you know it, even though you've only ever put off the call one day, you've done that enough times in a row that now it's been 2.5 weeks and you're too embarrassed to call the seller back. Am I talking to you? You bet I am. Do you ever get the information from the seller and then not call them back to make the offer? And then the way you justify that to yourself is you're unsure and maybe, okay, I've come up with a number, but that's so far off of what they're asking, and I don't know quite how to make that happen. What I'm going to do is, and that's going to be a tough conversation. Do you ever do that? Have you ever dreaded that? Has that ever been hard for you to accomplish? Yes? Good. So if you're guilty of these things, let's ask why. What's stopping you from generating those leads? Why aren't you jumping on the phone every time a seller calls? Why aren't you excited when the phone rings and you know that it's something generated from a piece of marketing because you're using Google Voice or you have a separate line or whatever? That should get your heart pumping in a good way, not in a dreadful way. And why do you procrastinate in returning those calls and making those offers? What's the problem? All these things are supposed to be, the key to your financial success, right? You succeed in real estate by talking to people and making offers. That is, certainly not all of it, right? But those are the most basic things that you have to do. And if you aren't doing those things the way that you intellectually know you should, there's got to be a reason, right? So let's face the reality of it. You're losing thousands of dollars every month, frankly, if you're not doing the marketing because you're afraid that it will bring in leads. You're afraid of your marketing succeeding. Does that seem wrong to anyone? But for a lot of you, that's absolutely the reality. You're losing money if you're not comfortable that you'll always know what to say to sellers, right? Because we're afraid of getting stuck with something, getting stuck in a situation. You're afraid of getting caught flat-footed. And now, I don't know, things went awry and there was a long, uncomfortable pause. So you're so afraid of screwing up any individual deal that it's easier to avoid it by not just putting those potential deals on your plate to begin with. So the fear of failure contributes to your lack of trying. And, of course, you're not sure that you can always come up with the right price and terms and are therefore hesitating to make offers in the first place. Those things are costing you a ton of money. And the reason is that at some level, you're afraid to talk to sellers. Now, some people are just uncomfortable talking to strangers. Some people are uncomfortable speaking on the phone for some reason. And some of you go, well, that's not me. I'm not nervous about ordering takeout pizza, and I chat with strangers all the time, at RIA or at the grocery store or whatever. But if you really dig into kind of your own hesitation, sellers are a different little game, aren't they? Because the stakes are higher. And for a whole lot of people that I speak to, when you kind of get down to it, they are uncomfortable talking to sellers because they're afraid something is going to go wrong. So you don't like, here's why that is. You don't like telling people things they don't want to hear. Like, I can pay you X. I know you want X for your house, but I can pay you $20,000 less than X. And some of you, that's a nerve-wracking moment. That's a pulse-pounding moment when you're on the phone or in person and you kind of talk around to that and you build this long, gentle ramp up to actually offering them the dollar figure, and then maybe you duck it and try to circle back around to it again. And, my heavens, not only does that stretch out your agony, it also doesn't necessarily fill the seller with a whole lot of confidence that you know what's going on. And one of the other things that you fear constantly in most cases is not just, oh, I'm going to get caught out here, but I'm going to look unprofessional. Maybe I'm going to look a little foolish. So you're afraid that the seller will ask a question or have an objection that you don't know what to do with. And you're going to look stupid, or you're going to look like an amateur, or whatever. And I understand that, but you're also afraid that you're going to make an offer, and somehow you're going to get caught up in the heat of the thing somehow, maybe in the dickering, or because you didn't fully comprehend all the ramifications of what you were doing. That when the dust settles, when you wake up the next day, you're going to be like, holy cow, I'm in a bad deal, and now I'm stuck with it. I see these things all the time with people. And you're also afraid that maybe the seller's going to be hostile. Maybe you're going to make the low offer and they're going to blow up at you. Or you're going to make the creative offer and they're going to call you a con man or a scam artist. What's the reality there? Does it happen? Hey, it does sometimes. Sure. Especially if you don't know how to structure the deal properly and then explain that structure. So here's the truth. You're always going to get flustered by off-script questions from the seller. Occasionally they're going to ask you something from so far out of left field that you're going to be flat-footed and not know. You're always going to be afraid that you're saying the wrong thing, or maybe potentially leading yourself down the wrong path into making the wrong offer. And you'll always avoid the crucial conversations and offers, the tough calls that you have to make to be able to make a real living at this business, until you realize, until you internalize what I'm going to tell you today. You'll always be stuck by these things until you not just hear me, not just listen to me, but actually absorb all this stuff into the hindbrain, or wherever that stuff lives. I don't know. But what we're going to talk about tonight is going to be a difference maker for you if you actually hear me. And I know I'm making some big promises, but believe me, I'm going to fulfill them. So I know a lot of you maybe know me. Some of you know me. A lot of you know me a little bit, or at least have heard Vina make reference to this Mr. Drew guy. So, who am I? Let's start with who I am not. I am not a real estate guru by any stretch of the imagination. I tend to dread real estate gurus. I am not a trained speaker. If that's not obvious already, believe me, it will become increasingly obvious as the evening wears on. And frankly, I'm not someone who aspires to be any of those things. I have no interest in, selling things from the platform and, traveling the country, selling courses and that kind of thing. I kind of do what I do, and I do the investments I do, and I like to quietly grow rich. I don't want to be on the cover of anything. I have no interest in being famous. So let's talk about kind of what I am a little bit, since I've told you what I am not. The truth is, I'm a 9th grade dropout who makes more money than you do. That's the harsh reality of it. I have almost no formal education, and I am in some ways the least likely successful real estate investor in the world. But there it is. I am, by virtually every measure, quite successful. I am, as Vina said in my intro, I'm an experienced real estate transactioneer. I've been in the business, I've been full-time for more than 20 years. And we throw out the number 800 deals. I've never kept track. I've never counted. This is an estimate. It's higher than that, frankly, but we went with a number that we were sure of. But I've been full-time making my living at this for a long, long time, and I've sort of been to the mountain, and I've spent my time in the trenches. So I am a guy who understands what you're trying to achieve. I'm the guy who can fix it for you. So what is it? It is your fear that you're going to get caught flat-footed, that a seller is going to say something that you're not going to get or have a ready answer to, or be able to explain to them, and you're going to look like an idiot or look unprofessional or just look like you're a con artist, God forbid. That you're going to get objections that you just don't know how to respond to, or you don't know how to offer them the proper assurances. It is your fear that you're losing out because you don't know how to construct and explain these deals. You only know one way to buy houses. Some of you, the more experienced of you, might know two. A couple of you have even heard that there's a third way. You're maybe not 100% sure how that works, but you've heard the rumor of it. And that's barely half the battle. You can have an innate understanding, a complete understanding of those mechanics of this is how that exit strategy works. And even, this is how I find them. But you lack the ability to explain those deals to the sellers. What you have to do to be a proper real estate transactioneer is not just be able to structure the deal properly. You then have to be able to show the seller that you were solving their problem. So you figure out what their problem is, you figure out a solution to it that solves it for them and for you, and then it's not enough to just offer it to them, because oftentimes the seller, pardon me, I've got yet another fire truck going by, the seller doesn't really know what their problem is. What every seller wants is, I want the highest price possible and I want to sell for cash. But they don't need cash. No one needs cash. We need the things that cash can buy. And that changes from seller to seller. So you find out what their true need is, what their true problem is, even though they will almost never verbalize that to you. You have to get into their brain and dig around and find out what it is. And there's a whole technique. There's several techniques for that, about asking leading questions, about going from the general to the specific, about a technique that we call active listening to get to elicit that information from them. Figure out the structure that's best going to solve their problem while making you money, and then show them that you have solved their problem in your explanation. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere. So what I'm not going to teach you tonight quickly is how to get leads and how to wholesale, retail, rent, lease option, sell a land contract, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? Because frankly, that's not my thing. There are lots of experts out there who can do that, like Vina. Vina's got a ton of expertise explaining to real estate investors how to do all those things. She has home study courses about how to do all of those things except rent. She doesn't have a course on rent, but she does know a lot about it because she's owned rental property since the son grew up. But I'm not the source for that. I am, like take the Get Leads, for example. I am the least competent marketer in the world. In our office, the marketing, the writing of copy, of sales letters, of yellow letters, all that stuff, that is all in Vina's wheelhouse. Because if I had to write an I Buy Houses letter, it would sound something like, hey, I'm Drew, and I'd like to buy your house, maybe, if I could. So call me. And I'd be standing there staring at the page going, there's nothing left to say. I don't know what else I can do without actually being, talking to someone, or even better, being face-to-face with them. So that's not my medium. So I'm not going to attempt to teach you that kind of stuff. What I am going to teach you is the middle part of what the nebulous they, meaning real estate speakers, don't cover. And I will accept Vina from that because Vina has recognized that this is a necessary part, and she often does cover it. But here's the general look of these things, right? Every deal looks like this. There's the get the lead part and the exercise the exit strategy. And you notice there's a bunch of blanks in the middle here. So when you go to a RIA meeting or you go to ORIA or something like that, there are usually a bunch of experts up on stage. And what they're doing is they're teaching you generally about exit strategies. And then if they've got an especially complete course or they've thought it through, they're also going to teach you, hey, here's how you generate the leads for this kind of exit strategy as well. So they kind of cover the very first thing and then the very last thing. And that's very sexy, right? And they get to, show a lot of success stories. But the unsexy, incredibly necessary kind of key components of this are all here in the middle. The get the information that you need, the evaluate the actual deal, the actual making of an offer, and then closing the deal, whether that closing means actually go to a title company and close the deal, or close the deal meaning get a signature on a piece of paper to get the deal locked up, right? Get it all codified, get this deal done. And this stuff is a little more squishy. It's not, hard science. It's more of a soft science. It's not, this is how you crunch the numbers and spit out the results. There's number crunching involved, certainly, but there's a whole lot of listening and kind of people business and, I don't know, emotional stuff that oddly I'm not terribly comfortable with, but I seem to be a little good at it. So, and that means that this stuff is not a talent. It's a skill. It can be learned. It can be taught and it can be learned. So if you don't have this stuff, if you don't have the chops for getting the complete information, I don't just mean how many bedrooms is in the house. I mean the whole milieu. Give me the history. Give me the narrative. How long have you owned it? Why are you selling? What have you done with it in the meantime? What are your plans for the money? What's causing you to sell right now? Have you tried other things? Really, you've had it listed for a year and a half? Have you had any offers? No? I wonder why not. Because you're asking too much. That's the market telling you, all that kind of stuff. This is the stuff in the middle that you actually need to be able to rock to make a good living at this, not just do the occasional deal, as a blind squirrel finding a nut, where all these other things line up or maybe don't matter, and so you have to, so you can manage to do a deal. All right, let's move on. So what I'm not going to give you tonight quickly is everything you'd ever need to know to do or to say or know to make more and better deals. I can't give you everything. Venus already sent me a text saying I'm over-explaining because we're now 24 minutes into the webinar. I'm sorry. This is hard for me to compress all this down as hard as I can. So this isn't the end-all be-all, right? This is an introduction. This is just to show you the vast extent of your ignorance, if I can be blunt. So what I am going to give you tonight is the most important deal-making concept you'll ever absorb for this business, and that is the difference between transactioneering and negotiating. I'm also going to give you some specific tips that have made me millions of dollars. And I questioned that slide when it first got written, and I'm like, I don't want to be one of those guys, millions. And Vina was like, how much do you make a year? Think about that. Now multiply it by the number of years that you've made that much money. And I'm like, holy crap, I've made millions. Why don't I drive a Ferrari? What's wrong with me? So, actual real things that actually work. So let's dive into transactioneering versus negotiation. Dictionary definition is the mutual agreement and arrangements of terms of an agreement. Mutual discussion and arrangement of terms of an agreement. That sounds swell, but do sellers ever suggest that you make payments to them? I mean, the mutual discussion and arrangement, makes it sound like we're all always on equal footing and that we're just, kind of trading. I'll give you A if you give me B, and it really doesn't work that way. That in the real world, that's not how it is. And oddly enough, negotiation is often thought of as adversarial, which is a little strange because theoretically, in a lot of ways, you and the seller are on the same side. there's an expression in real estate: the seller wants to sell and the buyer wants to buy. And what that means is, when you kind of think about it, you're both trying to achieve the same ends. You both want that property to transfer from the seller to you. What we're trying to figure out is just what that's going to look like, and if we can both live with what that's going to look like. And in our case, what we do is try to figure out, again, what the seller actually needs that to look like to solve their problem, as opposed to what they kind of want that to look like. They haven't analyzed their whole needs versus wants question. You know, in my experience, virtually never. I'll put it that way. So that's what we have to do for them. And negotiation is scary. It's scary for you and the sellers. It's just like meeting a wild animal in the woods. They are more scared than you are. By virtue of having been to some RIA meetings or to the ORIA convention, you already know, even if you're a raw beginner, and I know the crowd is a mix, but even if you're a raw beginner, you already know more about real estate than the average seller. What they know is they bought a house by talking to a real estate agent, and that real estate agent showed them some properties. They told the agent what they wanted to pay, basically by guessing at how much under asking price the seller might be willing to take. And then they went to a bank and signed a huge stack of paperwork, and they got the keys and a payment book. And that's what they know about real estate. They know maybe there's something called a deed involved somewhere, but they're not really sure who has that or whether that's vital or anything like that. So you are kind of in the driver's seat in all of these transactions. And I'm not saying beat the other guy up. I'm not saying lord it over him. I'm saying be careful and be thoughtful and move at the seller's pace to try to get what they need out of them and try to get what you need out of the deal. So this is negotiation, right? The seller wanted $24,000 for his house. You can see the little picture up here. We offered him 12. He asked to split the difference at 17. That's a very common expression. It's a very common phrase when you're dealing in this kind of market. Well, you know, let's split the difference. So the problem was that $17,000 was way above our maximum allowable offer, what you've heard referred to as the MAO. Splitting the difference doesn't make any sense to us. And he wouldn't budge because that's what he paid for it, right? So he didn't want to feel like he was losing money on this deal. So a negotiator might say, how do I get him to come down more, right? Or how can I, what corners can I cut to bring the repair estimate down? Or, you know, how do I convince the buyer to pay more? Do I have to go looking for the proverbial bigger sucker, you know, or somehow track down someone who has a specialized interest in this kind of property in this neighborhood who's going to be willing to pay more, or do something, anything, to be able to raise my maximum allowable offer? And that's tough. A transactioneer might say, so what's the real issue here, and how do we go about solving it? In this case, the guy felt like he was losing money if he sold for less than $17,000. Now, oddly, that was even though he'd rented it. He'd been a reasonably successful landlord, and he'd rented the property for 21 years. And it was in much worse shape now than when he bought it 21 years earlier. But he was still stuck on that, right? And we did a little exploring, and this was this guy's thing. You know, this was his problem that we had to sort of winnow out. That he was had a big chip on his shoulder about the idea of losing money on this property because that would have made him feel bad. So we offered him $17,000 in a way that worked for us. Now, I just said that was above what we were willing to pay for it, right? And as a cash deal, that's certainly true. The way we worked that is we did payments of $170 a month for 100 months. When you add that up, when you do that multiplication, that's $17,000. The other thing that we did is we made the first 6 payments up front. Now, hear me. We are not making a down payment. We are paying the first 6 months payment in advance. Why? So when it came time to actually go to the closing table and there was prorated taxes and seller side closing costs and all that, so he wouldn't have to literally come out of pocket. So he wouldn't have to bring a check to the closing to cover that stuff, because we're pretty sure that wasn't going to fly with this guy either. And that is a huge psychological thing with sellers. If you can figure out a way in a kind of a skinny money down deal like this to pay, significantly less, but not have the seller bring a check for $5 to the closing, you'll do better than otherwise. Because if they have to actually bring any money to that table, that hurts. Psychologically, it injures them. So keep that in mind. So we're paying a little over $1,000 up front as payments in advance. So our next payment wasn't due until 7 months later. There was obviously no interest. It's $170 a month for 100 months. There was no qualifying. There was no, fill out this form, or let me pull your credit, or, let me talk to your boss, because Lord knows that's not going to get anywhere, right? So here's what we did with it. We wholesale it to a landlord for $22,000, which is more than we could have gotten for cash, because we were able to offer financing. $3,000 down, 10% interest. How much am I paying? Nothing. How much am I getting? 10. Sweet. And payments of $280 and change for 100 months, of course, starting at month 1. So from the word go here, we've put money in our pocket in the form of his down payment. We are making money, we're making interest on money that's not even ours. So our total profit on what would have been, if we could have beat this guy down a few grand, would have been like a $3,000 profit. Instead, our total profit is nearly $13,000. And we did that, and we made a very happy seller, because he got his actual need met, which was to not feel like he had taken a bath on this property. So this worked because it wasn't about negotiation. It wasn't about sort of the straightforward dickering back and forth of, no, take this, no, I'll take that, no, how about this, no, how about that. That kind of push me, pull you stuff that everyone sells as negotiation, but that's only one dimension of the whole story. So the traditional negotiation, it doesn't work in a lot of cases. You don't necessarily want to be a good negotiator. What you want to be is an adept transactioneer. And that's the difference between making that deal and not making it. So transactioneering is more than just negotiation. Negotiation is part of it. I mean, I'm going to tell you, sure, that's an important key too. But it's more than that, and it's better than that, and it's more powerful than negotiation, and more effective, and easier, because it's not scary, because it's not confrontational, because it's not this crazy suite of horse trading. It's deal making, not deal finding. You are not sifting sand for 1,000,000 years trying to find the occasional gem. And Vina and I have said more than 1,000 times, the best deals are not found, they are made. When we hear other investors, or even some of Vina's students, complain that they can't find a good deal, or that they have spoken to sellers, but all of them are asking too much money. They all want too much. Of course they want too much. I want too much for everything I have. Everything I have is for sale. It's just for sale for too much money. That's why I still have it. So that's not it. You can't make a real career out of trying to find deals. Great deals are made. They are created. You talk to the seller. You extract information. You actually listen to that information. And then you use that information to make a win-win deal that serves everyone and that actually meets the need. So steps to transactioneering a deal involve getting the information that you need to understand the seller's whole situation. That's what we've taken to calling the milieu in my office. It's the totality of the circumstances. And I want to sell my house. That's not the situation. It never is. It might be a tiny little fragment of it. Then you use that knowledge to create a deal that solves the seller's problems and makes you money. Your job, your primary job as a real estate investor, is to solve other people's real estate problems. Are you hearing me? It's to solve other people's real estate problems. You have specialized knowledge that they don't have. They only know one way out of this, and that's for some sucker to come along and pay them more cash than their house is possibly worth. And that's why they're frustrated and scared and sometimes angry and hateful. So you figure out a way to actually make that happen. And as a side effect of you performing your job well, you make money. Quite a bit of it sometimes. Enough for a comfortable living. And then you convey to the seller why this meets his needs, even though it's not what he expected. Hear me again. It's not enough to solve his problem. You have to show them. You have to show the seller that you're solving his problem. So this is how transactioneering looks in real life. This deal was brought to us by one of Venan's coaching students, one of her fast-track people. It's a 6-room, 3-bedroom, 2-bath rental. It's worth about $65,000. It needed literally like $1,000 in work to be rent ready, and it'll rent for $750 a month. The seller bought the house to live in. Then he bought another house closer to his mom, and he rented this one. As it turns out, he was a fairly miserable landlord. He was miserable, I suspect, after meeting this guy, that his tenants were probably miserable as well, because he just was not well suited for that business. And after the last tenants moved out, he did some cleanup work, he did a little fixing, but he just couldn't bring himself to re-rent it. He didn't want to go through the whole thing again. So what he wanted to do was just sell it. He just wanted to get out of it, is what he said. And what that meant was he knew that for a quick sale he wasn't really going to be able to get more than his loan balance. He was hoping to get that and just get out clean. He owed $38,100. Here's an interesting fact. At 4.25% interest, this is one of the reasons why we want to know the entire situation, not just what are you asking for the property. So he had payments on the place of $378 a month PITI. What the seller wanted was $40,000 cash. Right? He wanted to be able to pay off the loan, cover his closing costs, and get out with the skin intact. Here's the question. If he gets what he wants, what does he net? Are their hands up? He gets nothing. Let me ask you this, if he sells the property subject to, what does he net? Theoretically, the same nothing. So should it make any difference to him? Maybe not. But here's why we're interested. If he sells the property subject to the existing loan, this is what we get. I said it'd rent for $750 minus the regular holding cost, maintenance, blah, 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 minus the outgoing payment is $222 a month in cash flow. There's no tax and insurance as a line item in this because, remember, this is a PITI payment. So we get positive cash flow of more than $200 a month. Plus, by the way, oh yeah, we've also gotten more than $15,000 in equity. Decent deal for us? Yeah, sounds okay. So here's the offer. We'll give you $500 in cash. You will give us the deed to the property, and we'll make your payments from now on. So it's not exactly equal to him. In one of these deals, this guy actually gets $500 instead of just being out of it clean. To him, this was enough to tip the scales. So is that the offer that the seller was expecting or even asking for? Well, no. But did it actually solve his problem? Was he better off getting $500 cash than no cash at all? Of course he was, right? It's better to have $500 than not have $500, particularly for this guy, who for $500 was a chunk of money. Were we better off getting that financing, 4.25% fixed rate loan? Or if we'd had to pay cash for it, we had to go out and drum up private money and probably pay 8% for it. So he's better off, and we're better off, and the house is better off, and the neighborhood is better off, and the bank gets someone who's going to continue to pay them, even if this guy gets in trouble because it's not his thing anymore, right? That's a win all the way around. So how do you explain something like this? This is one of those write this down parts, because I'm actually going to give you words to say, or at least words to approximate. The only way we can pay you what you want for this house is if you let us take over your payments. That's the truth of it. That's what you're willing to do, so why not just say that in a nice way? It's direct, but it's not aggressive. It's not mean. It's not impolite. It's just simply stated. Further, when we do this, you won't be responsible for anything anymore. And we can give you an extra $500 to take home. When I am doing that second part, I will often throw in a little more explanation of what they won't be responsible for, particularly if that has been one of the hot button issues that they have told me about. Things like, keeping up the yard, or the utilities in the winter when it's not rented, and I'm worried about the insurance, and I'm worried about vandalism, I'm worried about, and my whole message is, we're going to take all that stuff off your plate. We're going to, you won't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. If someone slips and falls and, breaks their arm on the sidewalk and they want to sue the owner because of an invisible crack, you're not the owner. I am. So none of that is your worry anymore. And then you ask the question, is there any reason you wouldn't do that? Because that's a better question than, are you willing to do that? It's easier to get to no than it is to get to yes. Keep that in mind. So we ask the question kind of as a negative. Is there any reason you wouldn't do that? Why, no, there's no reason I can think of that I wouldn't do that. Excellent. Then this is what we're going to do. So, when you transactioneer instead of negotiate, you make deals that the seller would have never suggested on his own. This guy wanted to come up with this. I was impressed that he'd managed to roughly calculate what he needed to get for cash to get him out of this deal. So, but he's not in the business of doing this kind of problem solving. He has no experience doing this kind of problem solving, doing this kind of deal structuring. So your sellers aren't going to come up with this. It's your job. You're going to make deals that work better for you and the seller than the just, cash. It's all about cash. It's, I figure out the value of the property and its repair cost, and I apply the equation, and then I spit out the number. A monkey could do that. And, make some money from time to time. But this adds a whole nother dimension to it. And when you transactioneer instead of negotiate, you make deals that you otherwise couldn't have made at all. So, who can relate to this kind of stuff? Vina took a survey of people who were signing up for the class that we're going to be talking about later, asking basically what was impelling them to sign up for the class. Why do you think you need, help with this whole transactioneering? And these are real answers from real people. I think I lose a lot of deals because I don't know how to structure them. I know that I'm leaving money on the table because I get flustered when I try to talk to people about creative deals. This girl said, I get confused when it comes to making the actual terms of the deal. I avoid making creative offers because I'm afraid I'll offer too much, or payments that are too high or for too long. I guess I'm afraid the seller will say yes. Holy cow, she's afraid that the seller will say yes, and she'll be stuck with a deal that doesn't really work for her. Now, interestingly, I know this girl. We share a mastermind group, and one of her stated goals was to buy property creatively. She's trying to accumulate a larger renter portfolio, and she has limited cash, and she doesn't have a job anymore, so she needs to acquire them creatively. And even if she had a job, man, how many times can you go to the bank and go through all their huge suck and you put 30% down and 6 months payments in escrow and all the crazy things that they want? So it was part of her stated goals. She was trying to work toward that, but she was afraid of succeeding because she didn't know exactly what success looked like. That's tough. So let's talk about a couple mistakes. The two biggest transactioneering mistakes: not getting enough information before figuring out the deal. Remember the milieu. You don't just need to know how many rooms and bedrooms and what they're asking. Now, I'll grant you, you don't need to know the color of the front door and the exact square footage of the deck they put on the back. And that kind of comes with it. You're casting, when you're talking to the seller, when you're interviewing the seller, if you will, you're casting a pretty wide net. So some of that comes down to patience, because you're trying to get to the information that you need, and you're going to get a lot of extraneous information as well. You're just going to have to live with that, because that's all in the game. Not knowing what you want before you ever enter into a deal, and that's called setting limits. What makes a good deal for you? You can't make good deals. You can't be a successful real estate investor by having the philosophy that I make good deals by talking people down on their price. Talking them down to what? Getting what kind of terms out of them, on what kind of property, in what area. You have to know all of that stuff up front before you even know what you're aiming at. And that's, a whole different discussion as well, but it's an important part of this and something that we cover, of course. So setting limits is deciding, based on your goals and industry standards, what your minimum cash flow is, equity position is, etc. Things like, is it brick or frame? Does it have a driveway? What neighborhood? How far is it away from my house or my work or whatever? So that you don't get excited and negotiate your way into a bad deal. So here are some rules to live by. I'm going to encourage you to also write this down. It's better to do no deal than a bad deal. Hear me. It's better to do no deal than a bad deal. It is better to say what you can do and leave the door open for a future deal than to violate your limits. You are not going to make every deal. No one makes every deal. The best analogy that I can come up with is that it's like baseball. It's like batting in baseball. If you are the best batter in the world, in the history of Major League Baseball, when you get in the batter's box, you bluntly fail more often than you succeed. It's true. And that's the way it is with real estate. I don't mean that you make bad deals more often than you make good deals. I mean you fail at making the deal you need more often than you succeed at making the deal you need. In other words, you're going to get rejections. You're going to get offers that don't go anywhere. You're going to have situations where the seller can't be talked into your solution, and that's okay. If you can't come to terms, you end on the most friendly, polite note that you can, and don't burn your bridges. You say things like, is it okay if I check back with you in 30 days to see where you are with this property? Something like that. And another important thing is buy into win-win. That's, for me, that's a little, I don't know, squishy and, self-help kind of language that I don't really speak. I'm not really a let's all hold hands and sing kumbaya kind of guy. But buying into win-win works. If you set it in your mind as a principle of your business that everyone's going to be better off for having done business with you, then you will reap benefits from that. So here's a nice example about knowing your limits and sticking to them. This house is worth $40,000. And for those of you on the coast, I did not misstate or misspell. It is indeed, it's got an after-repaired value of $40,000. Welcome to the Midwest. It needs $10,000 in work. So the seller called in August asking $35,000. They've owned the property forever. It's been rental property. They've since moved further away into a nicer neighborhood, and they're getting sick of it. So here are some of my limits. I don't want to own a rental more than 20 minutes away from home, and this is like an hour away from me. The most recent rental property I bought, I'm sitting in my office at home, and I am looking at the most recent rental property that I bought. If I were to open my window, I could hit that rental with a baseball because I am lazy. When I was young and full of energy, I'd buy a rental property anywhere. But as I've gotten older and lazier and more successful and more choosy, I don't want to run around like that anymore. So that's one of my limits. So I don't want to own it. Limit 2 is when wholesaling a low-end rental, I want to offer it at 60% of ARV. So in this case, I would be selling this property for $14,000, just based on the regular cash formula, right? That's what I would be selling it for. And I want to make $7,000 on each and every wholesale deal. That's another limit that I have that I arrived at thoughtfully. I didn't just decide that at random. In our market, for our effort, it's no more work to make $7,000 than it is $4,000. So why chase around a bunch of low end, for us, $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000 wholesale deals, instead of just upgrading a little bit and doing the $7,000 ones. Where you live and with your fact circumstances, it may be the same, it may be different, but you need to figure out what that's going to do. Where your limit should be. And we can do $7,000 deals all the time. $7,000 and up. So why not? So remember I said you say what you can do. What would you have told the seller? Would you have fessed up and offered her $7,000 when she opened the conversation by asking for $35,000? You don't have to tell the truth to me, but be honest to yourself. Would you really have done it? Would you have called her back? Would you have looked her in the eyes when you met her there and said that's what you were able to do? I did. Of course I did. My heavens, I've got no shame, and I want to make money. I don't have a job to fall back on. This is how I make my living. So after a little bit of back and forth, she said she'd take no less than $10,000. She's just come down in her price $25,000. Is that a win? Not yet. You know why? Because I wasn't at my limit yet. So limits make it easy to say this to the seller. I'd love to give you 10. my numbers say 7. If you change your mind, or if your circumstances change, call me. I'm always buying. It's that simple. I didn't go, well, she's come down $25,000. That's an awful big change, and I guess I might as well do the deal for 4 than not do the deal at all, blah, 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 blah. It's kind of the same strategy if you guys have ever gone to an auction. And it's the same strategy. This is what Vina and I do at auctions. We figure out what we can pay for the property, as the actual price, because whatever, buyer's premium and whatever. So we arrive at our number for each property. Then we write that number down on a piece of paper and hold it in our hands while the auction's going on. We bid up to our number, and then when the bidding goes $1,000 or $500 or, God help us, $100 over that number that we have written down on a piece of paper that we're holding in our hands, and the auctioneer is looking at you somehow by sheer force of will and his eyes bugging out, trying to suck another bid out of your brain through your mouth. We look down at the piece of paper in our hands and we shake him off, because we have a limit and we're going to stick to it, because that's the sensical way of doing that. So you're patient. I was polite to her. I actually offered her some good advice. I gave her my roofer's phone number, because they were like, well, I guess, blah, 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 we'll just keep it. Okay, here's a good guy. Tell him I sent you. Here's an alarm company. You're going to want to put an alarm in this. Give her some good advice. Make her better off for having dealt with you, even if we didn't do a deal together. And then sometimes that reaps rewards. This week, last week now, 3 months later, she called again. Her question was, she wants to know if I'll pay $8,000. She was not willing to go below 10 for anything, a little while ago. And I didn't blow up at her, and I didn't tell her she was dumb. I just left it alone. And in the last 3 months, she and her husband have done nothing to the property. They haven't put a roof on it. They haven't fixed it up. They haven't rented it. It just sat there, which is pretty much what I expected. So I told her, yes, I could pay $8,000. But if I could get the house now and pay that money in April, have I compromised my limit? No, I've transactioneered. And here's how. She's going to do this, by the way. It's going to happen. I'm going to make more than my minimum $7,000 on this deal, because instead of just negotiating, I've transactioneered the deal. I can sell it for more than $14,000 if I offer financing to my wholesale buyer all the way through April. I can, there's a whole host of things open to me. There's a bunch of options. I could either make basically the same kind of deal with my buyer of saying, okay, here's the price, but you just don't pay me anything until April. Or I could say, give me this much down and make monthly payments, and then you owe me a balloon in April, or whatever. I mean, I could come up with 4 things that would be a way to structure that deal off the top of my head. Vina could come up with 35 before the end of the webinar, which is why she's really tough to argue with sometimes. But suddenly, the sort of heavens have opened, and you've got options galore, and all of them involve making more money. So this is how you do deals like this. You've got to understand your exit strategy, right? And like I said, Vina teaches that. There are other qualified people who teach that. Very few of them are as qualified as Vina. But back at our chart where I said other people are giving you the first thing and the last thing. There are lots of them. Not my problem. I don't teach that. I could talk about that because I do it, right? I do all those strategies. I've been in the game a long time, but it's certainly not my core competency and nothing that I'm particularly interested in doing. So I'm not going to get into that. Then number 2, you set your limits. Number 3, you understand how to really get to the seller's source of pain. Really get to it. Ask questions. Listen. Feedback. Listen again. Understand, some of you have heard this called hot button issues. What is their actual problem? What is their actual need, not their want? Then you have to understand the different ways to structure these deals, be it some kind of seller financing, like just a seller mortgage or a land contract, or a subject to an existing mortgage with a bank or something like that. You have to know the complexities of these deals and how to put them together to then cure that pain. Then you have to show them that you know how to cure it. Understand how to figure out what terms make it a good deal for you because you're not a charity. Then explain the benefits of that to the seller. And then this is one of the most overlooked things. Understand how to document that deal. It's not really a deal until it's in writing. Real estate deals don't happen on a handshake. I don't care if you like him and he likes you and you understand each other and you're both trustworthy, blah, blah, blah. In real estate, if it's not written down, if it's not codified, it doesn't exist. So sometimes that involves fancy paperwork and specialized paperwork and careful wording. So to really make these deals work day in and day out, you have to understand those things and have them. So, Red, how much time do I have? Are you still with us? You still awake?
I'm still here.
Okay.
It is 9:04.
Can I waste, well, not waste, but can I take an extra 5 minutes to throw out an example or two?
5 minutes, you say?
Well, okay, maybe a little bit more. What I want to do, I want to kind of see where I was on time here, because I've mentioned a couple times that this is not a negotiation class, but negotiation is part of it. And what I wanted to do, if time permitting, is just kind of give you guys a taste of what I'm also talking about when I say negotiation is part of this greater thing. It's a negotiation. Yeah.
Can I suggest that you finish your slides? We get to Q&A, and then if there aren't a ton of questions, you can do your thing. Right now, there's only 2 questions.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Cool. Yeah, especially if they're going to lame it on the questions, then we'll have plenty to talk about. So here's the deal, right? You guys have a problem, and you probably don't realize what your need versus your want is. You want more leads, you want more deals, you want to make more money. Sure, I get that. What you need is the ability to be able to listen to a seller, understand their complete situation, create a deal that suits those needs and makes you money, and then present it in a way that the seller is going to be able to agree with. And I can fix that for you. I can absolutely do that for you. And here's how I'm going to do it. Drew and Vina's Transactioneering Mastery Program is going to be held here in Cincinnati, January 16th, January 17th, and January 18th. What you're going to get from this 3-day class is the ability to comfortably get the information that you need from the sellers. And hear me, I'm not saying extract it with a giant metal claw. I'm not saying fight with anyone or embarrass people into it or create such an incredibly awkward silence that they feel necessary to fill it, or some of that other bizarre stuff that you may have heard if you've listened to, quote, negotiation speakers. It's not mind control. It's a conversation. It's building a relationship and them telling you their story, so you actually have all the information that you need, and these people are your friends. How to do the numbers, because like I said, it is some number crunching, absolutely. It's part of every real estate deal, and get to the right creative offer. and then be able to explain unusual deals to sellers in a way that makes them agree, instead of just going, well, they're not even going to say, huh. They're not going to say, I don't understand. They're just going to say no. Or actually, the line that they're actually going to use is, I don't think so. Because that's how they refuse things that they don't understand. You know, I've heard it, and I've heard of it lots and lots and lots. What you're going to get is the ability to make more deals and make lots more money. You're going to make more deals than you're doing now, and you're going to make more money on the deals that you're already doing, because you're going to add another dimension to it. You're going to make more deals and make lots more money. Are you getting what I'm trying to tell you? More deals and lots more money. What we're going to cover, kind of the nuts and bolts. How to evaluate and negotiate subject to deals. Because it's not just as easy as, oh, look, they've got a decent interest rate and it's no money down, so let's jump in. How to get no qualifying, no interest owner financing. And I mean, really, this isn't some reality TV show, you know, filmed in, you know, a big city somewhere with, you know, great production values. This is real world, in the trenches, not an infomercial. This is what actually works for Vina and I to make our daily bread day in and day out. How to build rapport and make lowball offers without worrying about making the seller mad. This was one of Vina's big things when she was first beginning in her career. Vina hates to make people mad. She hates to have anyone angry with her. And, you know, so this was a point of emphasis for us. How do you offer someone $7,000 when they're asking $35,000 and have them still be willing to communicate with you so that you can pick up the ball further down the road? I'm going to tell you how I talked to that woman about that, and why, you know, she's still my buddy, and why she's eventually going to do that deal. Hopefully by the time we get to the class. I got another email from her today. We're also going to do live seller negotiations, which is kind of the money shot for everyone, right? Everyone always digs that. Not only are we going to do live seller negotiations, you, the attendees, are going to do live seller negotiations. Now, we're not going to make anyone get up on stage and be all flustered and embarrassed and full of a room full of people and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's not going to be that kind of, I mean, sure, we might try some of that, but it's going to be volunteer stuff. But there's also going to be some more kind of one-on-one kind of thing where you're making calls and we're standing over your shoulder ready to whisper in your ear and that kind of thing. The idea is to get you a little blooded, to get you a little comfortable, to get you to realize that the world's not going to fall apart if you stumble, and start practicing some of the phrases and techniques that we are going to teach you. How to, you know, you're going to start getting comfortable thinking on your feet a little bit. We're going to fill in all of those blanks that I showed you in that graphic. Everything between get the lead and then perform the exit strategy. So here's like one of my big calls to action. The reason that you need to register now is because you've got things to do before the class actually happens. We do 3 web classes to get you ready for this 3-day boot camp, to make you ready to actually make deals. There's one on setting your limits. Now, Vina and I actually did that one already. We just did it a few days ago on Saturday. We recorded it, so don't worry. Even though you're signing up tonight, you're still going to get it. You will get a link to that webinar. There's the second one is all about how to get the information you need from the seller in a non-confrontational, friendly, conversational way. We're doing an entire webinar on that because it's that important, frankly, and most people suck at it. You probably do too. You know, maybe not, but odds are, you know, that you're like, what do you want for the property? Well, I don't want to tell you. Well, I can't can't make a deal unless you tell me. That's not really the answer. Yes, it worked 5% of the time. So what? What about the other 95%? You know, how much money does that represent that could have been in your pocket if you hadn't ham-handed that? And the third one is going to be how to generate the leads that you need, because you're going to bring leads to class. Because when Vina and I do live seller calls, we're going to be doing it on your leads, for your deals, for you to make the money from. Yeah, how do you like that? After the class, you will get the audio recordings. We're recording nearly the entire thing. You will get the videos. We are videoing the class. So you can relive the fun and information over and over and over again. This isn't an upcharge. Yes, after the event, we're going to be selling these to people who weren't there, but as one of your Act Now bonuses, you're going to get all of that stuff. So do more deals and make more money. Between us, we have 45 years of experience actually in the trenches. We are not, you know, some esoteric speaker who made money in real estate in the early 70s, has been kind of resting on those laurels ever since. Over 800 deals successfully sold, and all that information is distilled down to its purest concentration of Irish whiskey like beauty and joy, and spoon-fed to you so that you can do the same deals now, the deals that we, you know, kind of got to by trial and error and by fumbling our way through and improving and refining and getting knocked down and getting up again and trying something different. You know, we're taking all that pain and frustration and just time, that exhaustive amount of time and effort out of it, and saying, hey, we already have the formula. We already have the recipe. Here's what works. And you're going to complain. You're going to bitch and whine because it's $1,297 for one person and $1,597 for, you know, blah, blah, blah. Wah. Because it's that much money. Please. You'll be insanely happy that you signed up for this boot camp. Insanely happy. And I guarantee it. And this is what the guarantee looks like. I know boot camps often come with guarantees. Mine is a little different. We guarantee that you'll make 50% more money with the same number and quality leads that you're getting now. And if we are wrong, you can return the materials and get a full refund 30 days after you attend the event with no questions asked. So we have a performance deal or a performance guarantee that doesn't involve you working 1,000 hours a week to meet the specifications of the performance guarantee. What you're already doing will make you more money. You will make more deals and make more money. You can come to the class, and I know the normal boot camp guarantee is come for the first day, and if it's not worth your money, you can ask for a refund. And then you're like, okay, but I'm in frickin' Orlando, and my flight out isn't for another 3 nights, and I've got a hotel room for another 3 nights, so, you know, I guess I'll go to Disney World even though I'm a 45-year-old man who's here alone. That won't be creepy at all. Our guarantee is come to the entire thing, all of it, and then actually try it out for 30 days. And then if you think that, you know, we were blowing smoke or it doesn't really work or we didn't know what we were talking about or I am just such a silver-tongued salesman, I convinced you to sign up for this boot camp, you know, without anything to back it up. Fine, you can ask for your money back and we'll just give you your money back. You don't need to fill out a form. You don't need to answer a questionnaire. You don't need to prove that you've tried it 100 times and send us copies of your rejected offer, because it's going to work and you're going to be happy with it. We know what you're fearing and dreading now. We know what you're stuck on, and we can fix it. But wait, there's less. You always need an Act Now bonus, right? Sign up before January 1st, and the price is just $797 for one person and $997 for a legitimate pair, a business partner, a spouse, a family member, blah, 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 right? So we're gonna knock a huge chunk off of the admission and take it from, just a crazy good deal to, I don't know, some used car salesman thing about, oh, it's a certifiably insane good deal. There's not a lot of excuses at this kind of price point. I mean, my God, think about the return on investment on this kind of price point. You invest under $800 and you make more money for the rest of your life. We will teach you how to buy a whole rented house with that $500 that you saved. The $500 that I just saved you right there on that slide, for real. We will show you how we did it and how you can do it too. So, as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, I am an amateur at this. I have basically no experience selling on webinars or platform speaking or that kind of thing. So a lot of you know that I was actually at OREA. Was that just last week or 2 weeks ago or something? And because some dude had a heart attack, and Venus like, get up on stage and speak, monkey. And so I put on my clean shirt and went up on stage and did that for an hour and a half a couple times. But because I was at OREA with a bunch of pros, I actually went around to these guys and I said, hey, look, help a new kid out. I know my topic, but I've never tried to sell anything like this before. What's kind of the best secret you have for convincing people to actually pull out their wallet and buy? And almost across the board, they had the same answer. They all said nearly the exact same thing. So even though I don't necessarily understand it, I'm just going to kind of take them at their word because, they're the experts, right? And what they said almost to a man is the thing that makes people buy is that you have to show them lots and lots of pictures of checks. So here we are. There's Franz Kafka, right? If you need a check. There's like a soccer team or something. Do you need more? I've got lots of them. There's the mayor of Prague, some military people, a girl in native dress, lots of pictures of checks. So I hope that does it for you. I don't know why that would convince you, but there it is. So you can pull out your wallet and warm up your credit card right now. So here's a real bonus. I know you're still scared, right? And some of you have kind of a steeper ramp than others, and you're like, oh, even with this help, I have so much trouble executing. I'm not sure, and you're kind of in your own way all over again, even though I've done everything in my power to dispel that in the 80 minutes that I've had so far. So how about this as a bonus? How about if I just do your first deal for you? Would that make you feel better? Here's my offer. If you're one of the next 5 people to join the program, to sign up for the boot camp that Vina and I are doing, I'll walk you through your next deal entirely. And this is what it will look like. You generate the lead. I'm not doing that for you. You get the information from the seller. I'll teach you how to do that, but I'm not going to do it for you. You explain to me your limits and exit strategy, right? Because I have to know what to aim for here. I have to begin with the end in mind and know where we're trying to arrive before I can plan the journey. So once I know that, I will structure the deal for you so it looks like something that'll work for them and solve their needs, and something that's going to work for you and fulfill your needs. And I'll do that up to including talking to the seller for you. Now, if you're local and that can be face-to-face, sure, we can all go. If it can't be a face-to-face meeting, either just because it can't or because you're not local, if you want, we can do this as a three-way call. I can be your partner, and we can both call him, whatever. You know, we're reasonable people. We'll work out what that has to look like. But you can be there if you desire and listen in, take notes, you know, whatever, and actually hear it happen on your deal, where I'm just concentrating on your deal live, maybe in person. I think that is probably the best possible bonus going. So let's sum up. Let me explain. There's not enough time. Let me sum up. The program is called the Transactioneering Mastery Program. It's here in Cincinnati in mid-January. There are webinars November 15th that we had just a few days ago that we have the recording on. The next one is December 6th, and the one after that that's about generating leads is January 3rd. It's right now, it is $797 for one, $997 for two. That is good through the end of the year. But don't wait until the last minute to sign up for this. Remember that there is homework that you have to do. There are webinars that you either have to attend or listen to, and then there's leads to generate and limits to set. I don't want you coming into class unprepared and going, oh, wait, let me interrupt the whole class to ask this question. Do I want rentals in this neighborhood or that neighborhood? You know, all that stuff can be done ahead of time. And if you need help, I'm willing to work with you on it. But I'm not going to tolerate that kind of, oh, I haven't done anything to prepare for this class but write a check, because it's frustrating to teach people who aren't going to do anything with it. You know, that's ridiculous and not my bag at all. I want to work with, it's okay if you're struggling, right? But I want to work with people who are actually going to try it, because if I can get them to try it and you're willing to listen to what we have to say, you're going to actually succeed at it. And boy, wouldn't that be nice. If what you're doing is working, we will make it work better. If what you're doing isn't working that well, we will make it work. So you also get audios and videos after the class. Don't expect them the day after the class, right? There's a process here. The videos and all that stuff is going to take some weeks to get together and edit and render and, you know, all that kind of thing. And if you're one of the first 5 people in, then you get the free deal structuring and live negotiation / transactioneering that'll go on between myself and the seller. The way you sign up is you go to Vina's website, which is www.regoddess.com, and there's a little text link up at the top of her page that says Transactioneering Master Program or similar. Or if you're someone who just wants to, who doesn't like putting their credit card in websites or something like that, you can call the soon-to-be sainted Christy, who is standing by. You can call her at 888-ASK-VINA. That is being forwarded to her cell phone right now. So she is ready, willing, and able to take your money and set you on this path that will improve your real estate investing for the rest of your life. How do you do this every week, Red?
Practice, practice, practice.
No, thank you.
Okay, so we have a handful of questions and a bunch of comments. Most of the comments were either people agreeing that they do all the things that you said they did about not calling sellers back and dreading seller calls and all that sort of stuff. A couple saying they would stick around for the examples, and now I have it down to the 3 actual questions.
Okay.
Didn't the guy selling the $17,000 house for $170 a month for 100 months demand some sort of interest?
No, he didn't. You know why? Because we met his need. What this guy needed to see was a purchase contract that said $17,000 on it. You know, his whole thing, if you remember, I thought I beat this to death, but his whole thing was, I paid $17 for it, I'm not going to lose money. He wasn't saying, I paid $17 for it and I need to make more than that. He just didn't want to lose that money. So we showed him 17, and that's what was important to him.
And in fact, I started to say, if you come to the Transactioneering Master Program and then do this, I will kill you. But if you are within the range of my voice, I will hunt you down and kill you if you ever offer a seller interest.
That's much less ominous than I expected it to be somehow. I mean, with the death threat, I thought there was going to be, you know, don't you dare, you know. But sure, I can avoid offering sellers interest for the rest of my life. No sweat.
Here's the thing. They don't need it. They're not making you a loan, and it's loans that carry interest, not I traded the keys to my house for the price I wanted. And what do you call the $5,000 extra that we paid to get to his price? He didn't get the $17,000 he wanted to pay instead of the $12,000 we wanted to pay, and interest. And if you don't mention it, they won't mention it. That guy never even mentioned it. And then two very similar questions from Tom and David. Can you expound on the documentation needed, and are there standard contracts you use for your creative deals? So the documents come in two parts for these deals. The first part is, how do I make the offer? Like, how do I put that on paper the way we both mean it, so that we can proceed to a closing and the title company will understand what the closing is about. And then the other part of it is the contracts and disclosures that you use to formalize the creative deals. So the subject to deals, the owner finance deals, those sorts of things. And the answer is yes, we have standard contracts. In the case of the purchase agreement, it's always the same purchase agreement. The question is, what phrases do you put into the part that says payable as follows? And you're going to get those when you come to the class. In the case of the seller finance deals, the land contract deals, the subject to deals, the answer is also yes, but they are different forms for each of those because they're very different kinds of deals. And you will also get those when you come to the class. And we will walk through how do you use them, when do you use them, at what point do you whip them out, which ones have to be recorded to actually make the deal like all formal and recorded, and which ones don't. And I think the biggest missing piece that I've seen in a lot of creative finance type instruction, and I mean that's not really exactly what this is. This is more how do you do the whole deal, including the part about the creative finance, is the instructors often either gloss over or don't seem to know about giving the sellers disclosures to sign before the closing, so that if sometime later they forget what the terms of the deal actually were, which sometimes happens, you can show them their signature on the disclosure. Mike's question is, do you have to have a real estate license? Do you need to have a real estate license? To do what?
To do creative deals? To do wholesaling?
You need to have a real estate license to
list property.
To market other people's properties and get a commission when you sell them. Linda's question, what about down payment when they insist on that and you don't have it?
Okay, so in the example that we gave, we didn't give a down payment. What we did was payments in advance.
I think her question is, what if she doesn't have $1,020?
Well, then you find a way not that they. Well, okay, let me restart. This is a question again of wants versus needs. Do they want a down payment, or do they actually need a down payment for something? What do they need the down payment for? Do they need it just so they're comfortable that you're going to perform, that you're going to, hold up your end of the agreement? You can settle that by just building enough rapport with them that they do feel comfortable that you're going to perform. Maybe you can give them other examples of deals that you've done, or even let them talk to other people that you've done it for. Maybe you can trot out some letters of reference that you've had. What's the word I'm looking for? Testimonials, almost, from other people whose problems that you've solved, and that's going to increase their comfort level. Sometimes it's sort of a split strategy. A line that I like, and this can apply to both the down payment and theoretically when a seller is insisting on interest, is your house can't afford that. Your house can't afford interest. Your house can't afford a chunk of cash as a down payment when I'm going to have to put all this money into it to make it operational again. Mr. Seller, you know what your down payment's going to be? Your down payment's going to be that I'm going to be hemorrhaging money into this property for the next couple months, and I invite you to come back and see the progress as it happens. And all I'm doing is improving your security on this whole deal. So if you're telling me you need $3,000 down, then tell me what I should skip in the rehab. What corners can I cut to make that money available to you?
I've never put as much as $3,000 down.
Well, sure, but I'm just spitting out numbers,
A transactioneer does not ask the question, how can I do this deal when I don't have this resource? The transactioneer asks the question, who has the resource? And in the example that I believe you're talking about there, Linda, which was the one with $170 a month for 100 months, we didn't produce the down payment. Our buyer did.
Yeah, remember we got $3,000 down, and we made 6 months payments in advance that equaled just over $1,000. I mean, all that happened at, basically simultaneously. We actually collected the money before we paid the money. I don't remember whether it was days or hours anymore, because Vina remembers every deal that she ever did. I remember that I did some deals in the midst of time.
Yeah, so we flipped that particular one partly because the reason that it had to be so cheap was it needed a lot of work, like more than I wanted to do, like replace a slate roof, which is an extremely complex and expensive job. Another question would be, can I find a partner who might be willing to come in for $1,020 to get part of my deal?
Yeah, the problem to a transactioneer is never, but I don't have that money. If that seems to be the problem, then you haven't asked the right question yet.
Can I get it off a credit card? Is there somebody I know who has a very small IRA who might give me $1,020 now if I paid back $1,500 6 months from now? Because they just don't get that many offers to do deals in their very small IRA.
Amen. People who have just a few grand in their IRA are looking for places to put it all the time, because there's just not much use for it.
I actually came very close to doing almost that exact deal a couple of weeks ago. A RIA member came to me and said he had this REO he was buying, and the bank was going to finance it, and they were going to finance literally everything except for a $1,600 down payment. The guy didn't have a $1,600 down payment. The bank was even going to finance the repairs, and he literally didn't have the $1,600. And he came to me and said, would you loan it to me if I give you back $2,000 6 months from now? And I said, I will, but you need to be aware that if you don't pay me back, I'm going to foreclose on that house, subject to that 4% loan that the bank gave you. So in other words, I'm not paying the loan off. I'll foreclose on it and leave the first mortgage in place, and I'll basically step into your deal. And he said, well, you know, I would sign it over to you first. And I was like, well, that's good attitude, but I'm just saying you need to make sure, you need to be positive you can have this thing fixed in 6 months and either have some income coming in or have it sold, because don't think that just because it's a little bit of money that I don't expect to get paid back.
I don't. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I thought you were done.
Oh, I didn't. If you have another comment on that, go ahead.
Sure. I don't remember the exact circumstances of this deal, but I know there was a time where we were in kind of a similar sounding situation, or I was, and the dude I was dealing with, maybe a lender, maybe a seller. I wish I knew. It'd make a better story.
This is a great story.
I know, it's an awesome story so far, isn't it? Bear with me. But
you want to think about that while I answer Yukiko's question?
No. I'm getting to the point. I said I'm not a professional at this. I'm used to running the tech side. Basically, the long and short of it is, I offered the guy the title to my motorcycle as security. And, you know, I said, look, this doesn't mean that it's going to, you know, live at your house and you get to ride it. You know, but, you know, sure, we'll endorse it and just leave it blank. And, you know, it can live in your safety deposit box. And interestingly, it was the act of the offer that made him comfortable enough to not insist on it. You know, because I kind of offered some proof that I was being sincere and that I was going to perform. And that negated the need for money to change hands.
Okay, so Yukiko has a tax question. How do you explain about the year-end tax return when the seller gets a tax form from the bank? How do you explain this subject to deal while you're taking over finance? Okay, first of all, Yukiko, if you did this right, the seller will never get another piece of mail from the bank. Because one of the many pieces of paper that you sign at a subject to closing is a change of address for the bank to send stuff to you in the future, because if stuff happens like, you know, they change the amount of the escrow, or I don't know if you ever had this happen, but I've had several times over the years where I've sent a payment to the bank, they've cashed it, but they've applied it to the wrong account. And the next thing I know, I'm getting these late notices, and they're saying, you owe us extra money, and we're going to take your house, and all that stuff. So you need that mail to come to you, right? So it will come to you, not the seller. Another thing that you sign in a subject to closing is a long disclosure, one piece of which is that the seller understands that even though the 1098 interest form is going to come reported to his Social Security number, that because he is not paying it, he cannot write it off. That you are writing it off because you are paying it. Now, the strictly speaking, accurate accounting answer to that is he should write off his interest, but he should also claim interest paid to him by you in an equal amount. So really, you should be sending him a form that says, I paid you, whatever the number is, $3,500 in interest, and he should be saying, well, I had $3,500 interest income, and I had $3,500 in interest deduction. And that's how you get to deduct the interest. I don't know a lot of people who actually go through that process, but that's, according to my tax guy, the way that it would be like super clean if there was ever an audit and any question about it. You'd be like, yep, I I paid him the interest and he paid the bank the interest. That's not really what happened, but from a bookkeeping perspective, that's what happened. Okay, it is 12:42. So I'm going to say you're going to have to leave whatever, special tips and hints you were going to give to people who are actually going to pay us to hear them in January, unless you want to be on the phone until 10 o'clock.
No, I'm pretty worn out now.
Sorry, 9:42. I said 12:42. It feels like 12:42. Like 9:42. It's 12:42 my time, Greenwich Mean Time. So
Vena Mean Time, maybe.
So we will call it a night then, and we appreciate you guys coming. Hope you learned some stuff, took some good notes, and are making the decision to come to the class in January and to participate in the program leading up to that, because that is going to add a lot of value for you. Again, it's arigoddess.com or 888-ASK-VENA. If you want to know if you're in the 3 people that get the free help from Drew, just ask Christy when you call her, or if you're not, we will notify you in the next day or 2, and if you are, we'll send you Drew's email address and cell phone number. So arigoddess.com or 888-ASK-VENA. I'm ready for bed now, so if you have anything to...
Just keep in mind, I mean, if a lot of you, if you're being honest with yourselves, way back at the beginning of this, you have at least some of the problems that I described. You're not comfortable talking to sellers. You don't jump on the phone. You don't get excited. You're hesitant to make offers, or to, you're maybe a little afraid that your marketing will work. We can fix that. Give us a chance for $797. Yeah, take the chance. We can fix it. You'll be happy that you did for the rest of your life.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Drew, for taking care of this tonight, and everybody have a great night and happy investing.
Good night, everyone.